Welcome back. Confusion on Capitol Hill. President Trump abruptly canceling the signing ceremony for the 21st Century Road to the Housing Act yesterday. The president posted on Truth Social afterwards, saying this: today's housing news conference and signing is hereby canceled until such time as we pass the desperately needed Save America Act, which I consider to be a national emergency. The Save America Act passed out of the House back in February, but Senate Majority Leader John Thune told me and has repeatedly said he does not have the votes to pass the measure in the Senate. Wyoming Senator Cynthia Lummis, meanwhile, joined me yesterday with a different tone. Watch this.
If the president wants to talk about the Save America Act, he's aware, because of Senator Thune's remarks, that we don't have the votes to pass the full spectrum of ideas that fall under the Save America Act. But we probably do have the votes to get certain portions of it passed. So we need to smartly break up Save America Act and get those components that we can get passed that will make a difference enacted.
So what would make a big difference? I mean, would you expect that having ID to vote and proving your citizenship will fly going into the midterms? Do you think you could pass something like that?
Yes, I think that we could pass something like that.
Joining me now is Florida Congressman Byron Donalds. He is also sitting on the Financial Services Committee. Congressman, great to see you this morning. Welcome back. And I want to get your take about this, because I think President Trump met with the Senate yesterday and said he's not interested in changing the Save America Act. He doesn't want to take anything out of the Save America Act. But what about what Cynthia Lummis was just saying? If the president's priority is getting citizenship proof to vote, do you think there are areas of the Save America Act that can pass in other vehicles? How do you see this playing out?
Well, first, it's good to be back with you, Maria. Look, let me be very blunt. I'm sick of the U.S. Senate. Look, Cynthia Lummis is an awesome lady. I like her. There are some very good members over in the U.S. Senate. But that body is lazy. They don't do any work. Ideas go over there and they languish and they sit. The members of the Senate don't even debate these issues. This is why members like myself support the president in ending the Senate filibuster, because the Senate filibuster does not lead to compromise and debate. It only leads to obstruction from the Democratic left. Let's be very clear. If the Democrats actually cared about securing our elections, the Save America Act would have passed months ago. But they don't. 80% of the American people want to actually have voter ID and protections to make sure that only Americans are voting in our elections, because it's common sense. So now that the Senate's getting pressure on them, now they're finally saying, oh, well, we can do a piece here or a piece here. They haven't done anything. And that's the problem. That's what's frustrated so many members in the House when it comes to working with the Senate to get common sense legislation through Capitol Hill into the president's desk for signature. And so, look, if they're going to start doing just voter ID or whatever, okay, fine. But they got to do something over there. Right now, the Senate just wastes time. They don't pick up these issues. They wait till the last minute to throw some Hail Mary back at the House, and then they expect the House to just carry their water just to get the issue off everybody's plate. It's sick. It's gross. It's disgusting. It's weak. I'm sick of it. My House colleagues are sick of it. The American people need to understand that the U.S. Senate is the reason why we are not tackling some of the major issues facing this nation.
Yeah, but I mean, House Speaker Mike Johnson says that he's going to be pushing parts of the Save America Act through a third reconciliation package. The president said he's not open to a compromise measure, but the House was already able to pass this. You're right. I mean, you passed it. You and your colleagues passed it as a standalone legislation measure. Is the reconciliation package really realistic? I mean, if Mike Johnson gets it through in the House, which would be great, which you've done before, again, it faces the same fate in the Senate, doesn't it?
Well, it's going to be complicated, just to be straight with you. The Senate parliamentarian is going to have a major hand in what's actually allowed to go through the bird bath, is what we call it up here, in Reconciliation 3.0. The other things that need to be in that bill, obviously the president wants matters for national defense. In Florida, we had major crop losses from a freeze back in February. Florida needs about $3.5 billion in crop relief because our farmers in the great state of Florida feed half the country, especially in cold cold months. We have major crop losses. We need to see that too. But when you're talking about putting Save America Act in, the question is the Senate parliamentarian going to let some of the provisions through? I hope that the parliamentarian would do that, but we don't know. That's, again, a question for the United States Senate and Leader Thune. This is where Senate procedure, quite frankly, is stopping the United States and stopping this government from being able to be responsive to key critical issues like the Save America Act.
So a big agenda for the Republicans ahead of the midterms. What do you think gets done?
To be honest, I think the housing bill that passed, and we'll do spending bills. We'll get that stuff through. We need to do everything we can to codify President Trump's border security measures. Again, we can pass that out of the House, but our Senate Democrats going to finally agree and allow for an up or down vote on the Senate floor that Donald Trump's border security measures have been in the best interest of the United States of America? The answer is clearly yes, but you have Senate Democrats who will refuse to end cloture so we can get an up or down vote on the floor of the House. So energy policy, Maria, there's so many things that need to get done. But you have Senate Democrats who will not give the 60 votes just to end debate. And it's not like they're debating over there. They sit in their offices and they hide from the debate. They're not on the Senate floor discussing these matters. That's why I think the talking filibuster or holding the floor is what the Senate should be moving towards. Because if you have a U.S. Senator, a Mazie Hirono, a Markey, an Elizabeth Warren, a Bernie Sanders, if they feel so strongly about an issue, then debate it on the Senate floor and hold the floor and don't yield it until you get changes. But they don't want to do that.
Well, what about the Clarity Act? I mean, you're on financial services. It passed out of the House last year. It's been held up in the Senate. Wyoming Senator Cynthia Lummis shared an update with us yesterday because I asked her about this fight between the banks and the crypto companies, and Jamie Dimon's comments to me saying he's going to fight the Clarity Act because he doesn't think it's fair. Watch this. The House passed Clarity almost a year ago. What is holding this up in the Senate?
We've been negotiating on the Clarity Act hardcore since last Labor Day. And it's been an arduous process. As you know, the major monkey wrench was thrown in it when the Genius Act revisions that the banks wanted became a huge issue for us. And I'm really proud of Senator Also Brooks and Senator Tillis for working with the banks to find that compromise. We're still working a little bit on DeFi. We're working on that's illicit finance. We're working a little bit on ethics, but we've been working through thousands of hours in negotiating, thousands. And we're finally to the point where we're going to put out a text over the July 4th and give people one last really thorough look at the bill. And then we're moving in July.
Moving in July, Congressman, your thoughts. Will the Senate finally get this one done?
Maybe. We'll see. Look, the issues that she talked about, I guess a couple of senators are doing these heavy negotiations on. We already took care of those matters in House Financial Services last year. And so the Clarity Act, the legislation is sound. Members of the House moved that product through. But now the Senate decides that they want to have their own rewrite to the bill. We'll see what they put out. But like I said at the top, Maria, so many of these issues go over to the United States Senate and then they just languish forever, as opposed to just finding a way to get it done. And I'm not trying to end the way the Senate deliberates issues. I think having deliberative process is what makes our nation work. You don't want Congress, you don't want Washington, D.C. to be a runaway freight train. But what we're seeing up here on Capitol Hill is, quite frankly, a United States Senate that just does not work, and it's stopping common sense things like the Clarity Act from moving forward.
Yeah. What about these far-left candidates? Three far-left congressional candidates endorsed by Mayor Zoran Mamdani won the primary elections on Tuesday in New York, as you know. Many Republicans now saying this is proof of the far-left shift in the Democrat Party, particularly in New York. That's one reason so many people have left New York and gone to Florida. The New York Times has an op-ed on the push for a blue wave in Florida right now, Congressman. Federal data shows more than 71,000 people moved from New York to Florida in 2023. Many move out because of the bad policies, high taxes, against police. Do you think those residents want a blue wave in Florida?
No, I don't. Actually, the people who have come to Florida, they've escaped the nightmare that is New York, that is Illinois, that is California, and they're registering as Republicans. They're registering as MPAs. But what they're really buying into, Maria, is the Florida way of life. They want the Florida dream for themselves. They're not trying to change that to have it look like what's going on up in New York, because it's a true tragedy for our system where you have these Democrat socialists of America who, by the way, call themselves Democrat socialists because back in the day they knew they couldn't run as communists. They wouldn't get support, so they changed their name to Democrat Socialists. And now they're winning elections up in New York and, quite frankly, destroying that city. And I'm a former New Yorker, born and raised, but it's really tragic to see what's happening politically to the city of New York. And that's why so many New Yorkers have fled to Florida, because they understand that Florida is a state based upon common sense, conservative governance, low taxes, low regulation. We just do it the right way, and you're seeing people move to our state. This is the fundamental principle that Milton Friedman talked about, that the movement of feet is how you judge public policy. And it's without a shadow of a doubt that people are moving to Florida because we're the best state in the country, thanks to Governor DeSantis and his leadership, and we're not going to stop.
All right, we'll be watching that, and of course your race for governor of Florida. Congressman, great to see you this morning. Thank you.
Thank you.
Byron Donalds joining us.